Very good. All right. Well, let me go ahead and get us started here. Uh, you know, my name is Mike Rhoades, and I work with an organization called Praying Pelican Missions, and we're a short-term missions organization that is based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. We've been around for a while, but we work all over the United States, in Alaska, all the contiguous, 48 states, and then we work all over the Central America and Caribbean, a little bit in Africa, and just started over the last couple of years in Israel. And so tonight we have been invited by Tori from the Standards of Excellence to kind of participate in this conference as a domestic oriented short-term missions organization. And so we're excited to be here. We're excited to kind of talk through some things that are on our hearts and hopefully share a few things that are going to be, encouraging, and then, maybe a few thoughts that, that can help you as you continue to plan for missions this year, or just process where you're going through, right? It's just been such a unique year that all of us have been trying to navigate these waters within our own ministries, within our own, groups of people that we work with, and lots and lots of questions. But as we turn the corner into 2021, I think there's generally a lot of hope and a lot of desire to get back out there and see the church continue to do what it does best, which is to go out and share the love of Christ in our communities, right? And so, so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about that. I do want to preface before we get started, just for maybe professional etiquette, or we'll just chalk it up to hashtag 2020 or something like that. But we had a blizzard here in Omaha today, and so my wife got stuck about 2 hours away at the family farm, and I'm sitting at the church tonight with my two kids who are very active and excitable kids. And so if they run in here and interrupt me, I just hope that you guys will show me a little bit of grace. And sorry, yes, hashtag 2021. Sorry about that. But I'll kind of hopefully pause and do a little dad moment right there and get them reoriented, and we'll keep trucking. But I don't know. They've got their phones, they've got their devices, their toys and stuff. So I'm hoping we've got a good hour in us here before they get too restless. But all right, let me pray, and then I'm going to go ahead and get us started and kind of get things introduced. So, Father God, we just thank you for the opportunity tonight, Lord, the opportunity to get together and to dream and to talk about missions. And so often in the church, when we talk about what it means to be on mission, Lord, it includes the idea of going. And throughout the year of 2020, going seemed challenging. Going seemed risky, Lord. But as we turn this new year, we believe, Lord, that there is the mission field is ripe, the harvest is ripe and ready. And God, we are praying for workers who are going to step out on the mission field and to share your love and to share your hope. And this is an opportunity for the church to really shine bright, Lord, to bring immense glory to your name during this season. So I just thank you for the people that are tuning in tonight, and pray for this session. Pray that it will be edifying. Pray that it will be encouraging. And ultimately, we just give it to you, Lord. And we're excited for this year. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. So first off, we are so thankful that you're joining us for our session. Our hope is that you're not only going to find this hour informative, but that you will also be encouraged. Like many of you, we're a ministry that was forced to pivot, right, a number of times over the last year. And we've had to look inside of ourselves and reaffirm and clarify the calling that God has placed on our organization and on our hearts collectively. So as we begin, I want to let you know that some of the things that we are going to discuss tonight are from a distinct perspective. They're rooted in who we are as an organization, in our unique calling that we believe God has placed on us and tasked us with. But we understand that there are a number of viewpoints out there, specifically in relation to COVID-19 and missions during this season. So please know that it's not our intention to take any kind of a stance or cast any kind of judgment on you or anybody else's stance on what should or should not be happening during this time. Each situation is unique. It's something that we want to honor and affirm as you seek to lead under God's direction during this time. But I will share that, from the very beginning, our organization, which started in 2003 as this tiny little missions organization that started leading mission trips in Belize, we have held true to the value of yes. That is something that's been a part of our DNA. It's rooted in a commitment to be a bridge, to be the conduit between the local church and our partners. And we believe that if we can do that, if we can bridge that gap between teams that want to go serve and our local church partners, that it can really encourage and build up and support those local churches to enhance what they're doing, to empower their ministries to thrive, and to really have incredible impact within their community. So we begin with that value of yes as an organization. So I just want to share that with you this evening so that you understand that when we share some of our perspectives, if they differ from what you believe, I just want you to know that that's how we operate. And so that's where, we have made decisions. That's how we've evaluated what to do in 2020. And that's how we're evaluating what to do moving forward. And that means that starts with the idea that we're not the center of missions. So for us, the value of yes is rooted in the idea that, we're the in-between, they're go-between. And so when we say we start with the value of yes, what we really mean is that we start with the idea that if a church or a group of people say we would like to go on missions, and we have a partner that says we would like to receive a team for missions, then we're going to say yes. And we're going to keep working to make that happen until we're forced to say no. Unfortunately, in 2020, all of us were forced to say no for a time, right? But we feel like we're turning that page. In fact, within our organization, we feel like we have turned that corner a little bit to where we're able to start saying yes more and more each day. And so, this evening, we're going to share some of our experience, and we're going to share some of our, insights that we've learned and viewpoints. And really, the hope is that it's going to be encouraging for you. I hope that it is maybe a little bit informative for you. And we recognize that, as you're navigating these waters, what we really are aspiring to is to see the church continue to be the light of the world, continue to go out and share the hope and love of Christ during this season. And we want to see people get creative. We want to see people, maybe move beyond a little bit of their comfort zones and to really step out in faith and see what God can do during this season. Awesome. So that's kind of the foundation that I'm setting that out there, just to let you guys know that when we share stuff, that's where we're coming from. But I want to take a moment, and Tori, I haven't said your last name. Rurik?
That's good enough.
Okay, was I close enough there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I've got two people with me. So Tori is with Standards of Excellence, and he's going to kind of come on at the end of this and share a little bit about what they're all about, and then open it up for some Q&A for us. And then I have also invited Laura Yak, who is our Director of USA Operations. So she oversees all the locations that we have here in the United States for Praying Pelican Missions, and she's been doing that for a couple of years now. And so I've invited her also to be a part of this this conversation this evening. And so my goal is to kind of tee her up a little bit and allow her to share a bunch of the experience that she's had. And then hopefully we'll get to some really cool stuff at the end of this to kind of wrap this up. But that's a good little spot here to transition. Laura, could you take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and then kind of share a little bit about your experience?
Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm so happy you could join us on this Friday night. Like Mike said, my name is Laura. I'm the Director of USA Operations for Praying Pelican Missions. And back when PPM was a tiny little missions organization in Belize, I went on a trip with them in 2005. I'm sure a lot of you here love missions and have seen life change on a mission trip, and that was it for me. I was going off to college the following fall, and it changed the trajectory of my life and what God had planned for it. So missions was hugely impactful for me. I started serving in Belize the following summer in 2006 as an intern, and I've been with PPM ever since in a variety of ways, serving in Belize. I started our operations in Costa Rica. I got to serve for a summer in Alaska, and now I get to visit a whole lot of our partners and pastors across the USA. And I just wanted to give some context for how we decided to move forward with mission trips in 2020. We have been leading them since June. And generally, Praying Pelican leads mission trips year-round. And so last March, I know we all have our own stories of what happened last March for Praying Pelican. We were out serving in Israel, Central America, the Caribbean, and all over the States. And around the first week, we had some teams say, I don't know if this is an okay thing anymore and have to postpone. And it was a March 12th, it was Thursday. I went back and looked at the calendar when we realized that just 2 days later, our teams who were planning to fly out or drive to their missions locations, that wouldn't be possible. We were shutting down too much, our entire country and other countries as well. And so that was heartbreaking to make the call to our teams, the group leaders, and also to our host pastors and say, we have to shut it down. We are postponing all of these trips that we had planned. And, those phone calls were met with a gamut of emotions, from disappointment, but also relief that they weren't the ones who had to make that call, because it was just a hard decision to make. There we as an organization just hunkered down. We all worked from home, and we got to all those projects that we'd always wanted to get to, but never quite had the time to, which is a great thing. And about 6 weeks later or so, in mid-April, we realized that we had a summer ahead of us of trips, and we could really go one of two directions. We could just pause and shut all those down and say, let's resume in 2021, or we could move forward and lead those trips in 2020. So then we started from there saying, well, what all would we need to do in order to lead trips in 2020? And we started to think through sanitation plans. We started to think through quarantine contingency plans if somebody tested positive on a trip. We thought our tech team developed an app where people could track their symptoms and temperature testing every day, of course, mask and social distancing. And we started to put all this in place. And we said, I think that there's a way that we can do this if our teams agree to this and if our host pastors agree to this. So we then called up all of them, and through that we did have a whole lot of teams that still postponed to 2021, and we understood that, but we also had teams that said, yeah, we're in it. If you guys are in it, we're in it too. And by the grace of God, we were able to serve in North Carolina, all over Appalachia, in Houston, Tucson, Memphis, Alaska. And it was interesting. We were all kind of waiting to see, we could get the teams there, but what would missions actually look like? What would ministry look like? We're very used to relational ministry and vacation Bible schools. And how would this look? We continue to hear stories after trip where they said, it might have been an organization that mucked out houses, food pantries. We're planning to host hundreds of volunteers throughout the summer, and our Praying Pelican teams were the only ones who were able to serve with them for that week. And they just said what an impact that was. It was a lot of extra work, especially ahead of time, making sure that all the plans were in place for them. But you could tell that there was such a tangible gap that was just waiting to be filled. So that was hugely impactful for us to realize that there were these really big needs that were out there. And we were blessed to be able to serve with teams that said yes alongside of us. So we've continued with ministry through the fall and winter here, going out on mission trips. We were able to launch actually in Lake Charles, Louisiana, after the hurricanes, and I'll be sharing more about that in a moment. But right now we have about 900 people scheduled to go with us through the spring, and currently for our U.S. operations, 3,000 to 4,000 for the summer. So that's kind of where we're at with things right now. I'll pass it over to Mike.
Awesome, excellent. So we'll do a quick transition here, and Laura, I'm going to have you talk a little bit more about some of those things that we learned about the practical kind of guidelines in place. I don't know who has used the words like mitigate or protocol or guidelines more often in the last year than they ever have in their entire life. I think we all would say that. Like, we've never been in a situation where we have had to, study those kind of things and really evaluate our ministry through those filters, like we have in the last year. And so Laura, if you could share a little bit about kind of some of those practical guidelines and some of the things that we learned that we were able to put in place in order to make not only just missions happen, but to make it successful.
Yes, definitely. So we are still operating under our COVID protocol. I can't wait to burn that protocol someday. Today is not that day though. But we've actually changed a lot since we first started. On our very first mission trip in June, I remember that our staff were sanitizing the floor twice a day. And luckily we know that the virus doesn't live on surfaces as long as we thought it may have. So we have shifted, and it's something that we reevaluate every single month. You can actually look at the protocol that we operate under. We try to make it very visible so that if anybody wants to use it, they are very welcome to. It's on our website at ppm.org. There's a COVID-19 guidelines section that has everything that we use. So feel free to check that out. We always tell teams that actually our staff are the ones that really feel this the most, because so much of it has to do in how the trip is set up. We have to ensure that we're going into ministries in a very safe way, that we are able to have social distancing guidelines in place. The ministries themselves have already shifted too, right? So that's actually not too difficult of one. We have to think through lodging areas. If you've been on a short-term mission trip before, you might be used to the air mattresses that are like really close together, and we had to shift that a bit just to make sure that they're spread out and safe from each other. Our dining areas, we have a whole thing in place for how those are set up, and of course preparing our teams ahead of time too. So we say that when teams come on trips, they're going to feel this the most in two areas. One is ahead of time, 10 days before the trip. We ask that all of our participants just track their symptoms and check in every day with how they're feeling in case they would have any symptoms come up. And then 7 days before the trip, we do ask our participants to self-isolate. We understand that there's still work and school and immediate family to see, and we say that that's okay. But beyond that, if you could be maybe a bit more strict than what some of our teams might normally be, so that we can be as safe as possible leading into the trip. Some locations do require tests, and we always say, if everybody would like to get a test, that's just fine. All of our staff get tested before we go out and serve for every single trip. So that's an option as well. And then on the trip, we just prepare our teams to wear a mask the entire time, from traveling to that mission site to being there, with the exception of eating, sleeping, brushing your teeth. If you can brush your teeth with a mask on, you are doing something wrong. But we'd say masks are non-negotiable, and our teams understand that and have been really great with that. We also understand that sometimes the areas that we're traveling to, the culture might not be quite as conservative as what our teams are doing, or what our teams are used to doing back home, and that's okay. We're guests in the areas that we're going to, and I think we've all experienced that before in other ways for short-term missions, how we adjust our clothing guidelines and things like that to make sure that we're just being really respectful when we enter into communities. Again, when teams wonder what will ministries look like, we really fall back on just how normal it feels. After about a day of serving, you get used to the mask, and it really kind of feels like a fairly normal mission trip. We've been leading, we call them leaders trips actually, where we bring people who are going to be bringing a team later on in the year. We bring them to their missions location ahead of time, so that we can introduce them to the host pastors and partners. They can see what it's like to be there under protocol, so that they can share that with parents back at home. And then they also serve with us in ministry, so they can get a feel for how that is. And last September, I was in Alaska with 18 leaders from 9 different churches. And, the common consensus was, after the first day of wearing that mask and just kind of getting used to that, it really feels like a normal missions trip. And it's hard to think about exiting the equation of short-term missions, even for a year. When last August, Hurricane Laura hit Louisiana, And we generally have a disaster response team that goes to areas that are hit hard by hurricanes. We never imagined that we'd be called to be a disaster response missions organization, but we realized that after they would hit, churches would call us and say, we're ready to go. Are you ready? And we'd also have churches that lived in that area saying, bring teams, we can host them. So we just realized that we were in a fairly perfect position to be able to facilitate that. So the hurricanes hit last August. We realized that we might not have as many teams serve as what we're used to. And we had that moment of, should we be doing this? Is this a smart thing to do? And I got to go down there along with the president of our organization to Lake Charles, Louisiana. And, we met with churches who were down there. Actually, the churches in Houston packed U-Hauls full of donations because they remember when Hurricane Harvey hit, and they wanted us to be able to bring that over to these churches in Lake Charles. So we came in a week after Hurricane Laura hit with generators and chainsaws, and we were talking about the very short-term response and how many people they would need just for the cleanup of debris and everything that goes into that. And I remember speaking with a pastor who said, this is important right now, of course, but what happens when it's 9 months from now and the very short-term response has been done and those organizations have gone home? What if we're missing all those normal mission teams that would normally still be there? And that really got to us, got to our hearts, and we realized that, like I said, we couldn't exit the equation for that. And so we got back home and we put the registration online, not knowing if teams would sign up or not. And we posted it, and we, by the grace of God, had 157 people come and serve from September through December. We actually have a team there. Our staff just got there today. We have a team that will be starting tomorrow. And then we have another 260 people who are scheduled to travel to the Gulf Coast area through next summer, and I'm sure that that number is going to grow. I know that there's a lot of people who are wanting to go and serve that area. So, there's just work to be done all over, and in the grand scheme of things, a mask, and this protocol, it feels like a very small barrier to be able to get back in the game that way. So, Mike, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. So I think, to kind of summarize that, as a short-term mission organization, right, we've been kind of in the throes of trying to figure this out because trips are our lifeblood. That's what we do. That's what we exist to do. And, we've really realized that, there are a kind of a good set of protocols and guidelines that when you get those in place, that they can facilitate good ministry. And Laura highlighted some of those, and I would kind of reiterate, if you didn't catch that, I believe Tori popped a link into the chat box there, but we've got those listed on our website. Take those, use them. If they can help you in your planning process or your decision making or anything in your ministry, we invite you to take those and utilize them. But we've also learned that it's been good for us as a mission organization to expand our planning. And I know Laura didn't really highlight this a ton, but one of the things we learned is that open communication for contingency planning within our domestic locations, communicating with local officials, having plans for what happens if you run into a situation where a participant gets sick or something like that, or you come in close contact. That form of planning and that level of planning in missions, I believe this year has actually been really healthy. It's been healthy for us. And when we get back to more of a normal situation, I think that's just going to deepen our ability to serve the community in an effective way. And I would affirm, we have been through it. We've been through, the good and the bad and everything in this last year. And we've seen that if you've got those things in place, that ministry can really happen. And so I want to take just a couple of minutes here, as a transition, Laura, I want to share a couple of maybe stories just to help people get some context of how, in spite of all of these guidelines, right, all of these things that create barriers between us and the people that we're going to serve, is ministry still effective? Can we still do this in a way that is impactful? And Tori, I know I shared this story with you, but I'm going to kind of reshare it, because Laura's gotten the opportunity to get out on the field a ton, but my role in the organization is a little bit more of an admin role. So I get to sit in my little office in the basement and work away. But this last summer in June, I got the opportunity to get out on the field and go to Charleston, West Virginia. And I went with our president, and we went with the goal of observing and seeing how these guidelines were put in place, how they were they effective? How was the team responding to them? How was the partner responding to them? And I know for me, the call and the challenge of missions in that moment, I was wrestling with it. I was trying to decide, is this really worth the risk? Should I be doing this? I've got a family, I've got kids, I've got, a few things in personal health that say, this is challenging, right? But in that moment, made the decision to go. And we showed up on the last day that this team was working on this little house in this dilapidated, forgotten neighborhood in Charleston, West Virginia. And this house had been overgrown by weeds. It had been infested by, it was a drug den, essentially. You walk in there and you can find needles all over the floors and things like that. And this team, a group of junior high students nonetheless, showed up for the week, and they had done a ton of work. They had peeled away all of the overgrown shrubbery. They had cleaned out the house. I can't tell you how many, we're missions folks, right? We can talk about this, right? I can't tell you how many needles they pulled out of that house. And you're going, oh my goodness, this is just crazy. And when I got there, they had basically almost gotten the house cleaned. They got it painted. And as we wrapped up for the day, the youth pastor told all of these kids to surround the house and put your hand on the house. And we're going to pray over this house, because the goal and the purpose of this was to rehab it so that a missionary couple could move into it and move into the neighborhood and invest in that community, right? And so, like any of you who've worked with junior high students, I was a youth pastor before I started with Praying Pelican Missions. And I can tell you, sometimes it's just controlled chaos with youth, right? Especially with junior high. You don't go super deep because they just got so much energy and it's chaotic. But what I got to see that day was a group of students who surrounded that house and put their hands on that house, and they prayed deep, meaningful, and dare I say, prophetic prayers over that house. They prayed about the experiences they had that week and the things that God had done in their lives and the things that God had done through them that week. And I walked away going, oh my goodness, if I had not been here, I would have missed it. I would have missed what God is doing in the mission field. So for me, it answered that question of, is this worth it, right? We've talked about the how. We've talked about, what it takes to get out on the mission field right now. But some of these stories, I think, cement in my mind, is it worth it? Should we go through all to get out there and get on the mission field? So, I've got a little long-winded there, but Laura, could you share maybe just a couple of stories about, the impact of actually having a mission team on the mission field right now?
Sure. Yeah, actually, the first one that comes to mind, because of what Mike shared about regarding prayer and just how that transcends everything. It transcends our fear, to just be able to enter into a time of prayer with somebody. And when I was in Lake Charles, we were looking at a lodging location, there happened to be these gas tanks in front of this lodging location. They weren't ours, they were just stacked there. And this woman drove by several times, and we really had no business speaking on behalf of this lodging location, but we kind of flagged her down and said, can we help you in any way? And she was asking about the gas tanks and if there's any fuel in them, which there weren't. And we just got to talking with her, and she shared how her home was gone. It was just completely gone. And we had literally nothing to offer her, nothing physical to offer her, but we said, can we pray for you? And to be able to enter into that pain with somebody, for them to know that there's people that maybe can't help with that immediate need, but want to come and serve, and are doing it, completely in God's name. That was just a really powerful time. Felt like any other, mission trip I've been on when you've encountered somebody in just that hard situation. We also had a team that was serving up in Alaska and serving at a food pantry. And one of the things I love about this food pantry is they set it up like a grocery store so that you can walk with the people that come to get food for the week around and help them pick out food. But it's a time where you can chat with them. And, it takes about 20 minutes to go around this grocery store, and it's 20 minutes alongside somebody building this relationship. And we brought this team to go and serve, and I wondered, well, how's it going to look? We're going to miss out on that, and that's too bad. Are we just going to hand a bag of food and then, we won't even have a chance to talk? And it wasn't like that at all. They're waiting in line, and we got to go outside, very bundled up. It was Alaska, but we got to talk with them. And, these ministries, working through local ministries is huge, right? Because they know every person, they love every person. They get to brag on every person who's coming through the line and say, this guy is so good on the guitar, you should hear him. And then we got to talk with them, and it really felt, it just felt like a different way of doing the same thing, right? The team that was serving in Alaska, they actually, at their final meeting, their meeting went until almost midnight because they were talking about all the ways that they could bring things that they saw on that trip home to them. And one of the ways that they saw that really impacted them, that they just wanted to bring back with them to, I believe it was Hill City, Minnesota, was how much the local churches, regardless of denominations, work together. There was so much unity, and they said, this is something where we aren't reaching out to the other churches in our own community to work together. And there's so much work to be done right now, right? Like I can think of all these nonprofits that have far less volunteers than normal, because a lot of those volunteers are in an age category where it's safe for them to be at home right now. And they said, what if we just linked arms with these other churches in our area, regardless of denomination, to serve a common purpose, serve our God? And how would that change things? So teams are still feeling the same impact, right? Like God is still revealing really incredible things to them on these mission trips. And it's exciting to see, exciting to get to be a fly on the wall to hear these stories.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to transition just a little bit here, and I want to take a couple of minutes and share really four strategic thoughts about short-term missions, domestic short-term missions during this time. And Tori, I know I didn't prep you on this, but hopefully I can put you a little bit on the spot. But I'll kind of give the header or the title for each one of these. Would you be able to drop those in the chat, just since we don't have slides or anything for people, so they can see those if they want to take them with them. And not to call anybody out, but Brian, you look like you're in a motorhome. You're ready to go and hit the road and get out on the mission field. So, all right, this is exciting. We're ready to go. All right. So the first thing, that I want to share about kind of some of the strategic thoughts about missions and domestic missions in particular, is that short-term missions can be very timely. And that's kind of the first thought. So, the needs within our communities across our country, they continue to grow. The message that we've heard over and over again over the last year is that the fields are ripe, but the workers are few. As Laura shared in Lake Charles, Louisiana, there was a great opportunity for the local church to rise up, to help people during this time of recovery, to be a light and a blessing in the community, right? But even though the local church is struggling for volunteers and for people to step in and help. And so during this time, short-term missions, we really believe, can be an effective strategy for the local church to help leverage workers, to get them out on the field, to meet those needs that are growing, right? I think one of the things that has been a defining factor over the last year is, the idea of lockdown and separation and creating distance between people. And short-term missions is very anti that, right? Short-term missions is about putting yourself into someone else's context. It's about stepping out and being relational. And so, that is a really cool way for us to mobilize the local church and to come alongside these local leaders in a way that they can integrate and infuse that essentially that workforce, that support system in a very timely way to benefit their ministry. Now, the second thing is it's the idea of navigating uncertainty. So what short-term missions is done, and it's really what missions in general, is really built around, is the idea that following Christ is risky business, right? Following Christ and answering that call is really, it's not something that is easy and simple. And a lot of us who have been in ministry have talked about that with our people. As far as when Christ calls us to follow Him, it's not something that costs nothing. It requires something of us. And this is an opportunity for us to, to kind of step out in a situation and build up our congregation. There's a verse, Matthew 14:29. I think we all know this story. We love this story about Peter walking on water. We've preached this story to death, probably upside down and sideways, right? But there is one little phrase in there that I love, when I think about navigating risk and what it means, how short-term missions can help our congregation understand what it means to live a life following Christ that requires risk. And then, in Matthew 14:29, it says, so Jesus said, He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on water and came to Jesus. So I've loved this phrase from the story of Peter walking on the water because I think it's symbolic to the type of following, the type of discipleship that we've been called into. See, Jesus was out there, He was doing it. He was walking on the water, and Peter wanted some of that, right? The response he received when he said, "Jesus, I want some of that," was Jesus said, "All right, so come, join me." And in that moment, it highlights the risk of faith and the pursuit of Jesus. I think it's worth pointing out two things. So just like Jesus was walking on the water, Jesus is already at work in the communities that we're being invited to serve in, right? And His message to us is, so come, participate in what I'm already doing, experience the incredible things that happen through bold faith. And during this time, I think this is an incredible message for our people, the people that we've been tasked to lead, the people that God has entrusted to our care, is to give them that message of, guys, this is the time to step out in bold faith, but trust, know God is there, He is working, and He's inviting it. So His message to us is, come, join me, right? And the second line is, I want to borrow a phrase from Pastor Mark Batterson out of Washington, D.C., which I can imagine he's having a blast pastoring a church in Washington, D.C. right now. But he has this line that roughly quotes, says, oftentimes Jesus doesn't deliver us from the struggle, but rather He delivers us through it. So in other words, could it be what we can teach our congregations, what we can teach our people through the vehicle of short-term missions, is that, with all of these things going on in our culture, in our community, in our country right now, it's not that God wants to give us a magic pill. It's that God wants to use us more than ever during this time. And by using us, He is not only going to magnify His glory greater than He ever has, but He's going to maximize our growth and the impact that He has on our lives, in particular, as we follow Him and we step out in bold faith. As leaders, I think we constantly navigate that, we walk that line, that balance of, pushing people out into bold faith and managing and understanding the riskiness of what we're asking people to do, right? And it's understandable. And this last season has been challenging because, we look at our friends, we look at our family, we look at the people in our church, and we know them personally, we love them, we care for them deeply. But I think what short-term missions can really do during this time is really be a beacon, an opportunity for us as leaders to challenge our congregation, to step out in bold faith, to step out of that boat, right, and answer the call when Jesus says, "So come." The one thing that I would encourage you guys is to lead with empathy and conviction through that. Realize that that there are going to be people that are in different places. Realize that it is a personal struggle and a personal challenge to this, and so as you are leading, chart a very clear course for where you're going and why you're going there and what we're doing. But more than ever, empathize with people's personal struggles. Understand that this is health related in many cases, and for some people that means that that this is a bigger decision and a bigger challenge than for others. But I think if we lead with that empathy and we lead with that conviction, that this could be a really great opportunity for the church, for us to really leverage something like short-term missions to help the church navigate risk and navigate what it means to live with bold faith. All right, so the third thing, Tori, that you can toss in there is patient persistence. All right, patient persistence. So I want to ask you guys, and rhetorical question. We don't need all of us just jumping in and talking here, but what is the one thing that you usually say on that first night of the mission trip when you're gathering your group of people together? Maybe you're in inner city Chicago, or you went to Jamaica for a mission trip or whatever, but you got there, you got in location, you're sitting down, you're surrounding everybody, and you're talking about what the week is going to look like. One of the messages that you preach to them is, and it's universal, is to be flexible, right? So every week in our country right now, there are fresh updates on the pandemic. We have new vaccines coming into play, new CDC guidelines, and a shifting, political landscape. And even with all this, we continue to have a high level of optimism that things are going to open up. And by late spring and summer, we will see domestic trips in opening up and getting back to full strength. And on one part, that optimism is rooted in the fact for us that we've been able to see missions happen already. But with all of that stuff, it is important that we recognize that as you begin to plan and you begin to strategize and work towards the summer, that patient persistence is going to be vital. And it's going to be vital because you're going to be working with 3 different stakeholders that you have very little control over their decision making, and I want to share some of those stakeholders with you. First, you've got government agencies and local authorities. We have learned this as an organization, and I'm sure many of you are in the same place as we are, that you don't have a seat at the table when they're making those decisions, right? So it becomes really important that you stay up to date and you resist the urge to make decisions based on inference or presumption. And this is important for a couple of reasons. I don't know if any of you guys have been pulled over for speeding. I know one time I got pulled over for speeding in college, and I looked at a police officer and I said, I had no idea that it was 35 miles an hour right here. And the police officer essentially looked at me and said, not my problem. And it brought to mind the phrase, ignorance is no excuse in the eyes of the law, right? So I still got in trouble just because I didn't know that I was speeding. I still got in trouble in that situation. And to me, that's a good thought when we think about dealing with some of these guidelines. As a mission team, we're entering into someone else's community, and it's important for us to ensure to our best ability that our presence has a positive impact. So our failure to adhere to local guidelines, it not only flies in the face of local authorities, but it can damage the reputation of the people that we aim to serve. So as we are out and serving this year, within our domestic locations, it's important that we know what is, what the stipulations and the guidelines are in that local community. The second reason that we don't want to jump to conclusions or infer things is that things are changing all the time. I'm sure you guys have dealt with this if you've been trying to plan for your ministry stuff, but things are shifting and changing all the time. One week they could enact a mandate that says no more than 10 people gathering at a time, and then 2 weeks later they could say it's gone, no problem, gather together in big groups, right? And so what we've really recognized is that as time goes along, that there is a loosening of these restrictions, or at least a settling of these restrictions into a predictable pattern, right? But they are changing, and so it's important for us to encourage patience in our planning with our participants, with our church leaders, with our partners, and it's important that we do this, in a way that that encourages people just to really take a longer view, right? Because our goal is when I say patient persistence, is we want to go serve, we want to go build up the community, we want to support these local people that are working in their community to make a difference, and so we need to persist through all of those changes. The second group of stakeholders is participants and parents. I don't know what your context is, but you know, you're going to be working with people as you plan for short-term missions. You know, if you're running a mission trip for youth, I can almost guarantee you that you will run into a situation where you're going to have a parent say, I don't want my kid to go on short-term missions because too risky, right? But hey, they're going to jump on a bus and go to the next town on Friday night and play a football game. And you're going to look at them and go, what on earth? This doesn't make sense, right? If you're working with, you know, adults or youth or whatever, you're probably going to run into somebody that says, you know what, I am not going to commit financially to this trip until I know for sure that this trip is happening, right? So I think that these kind of things are going to start to diminish over time as we get closer and closer to the summer. That's the sense that we get as we look at what's happening, and we pay attention to, you know, how things are rolling out. But it's going to be important that you have patience with those conversations. I would also advocate that in those conversations that you come with an answer in mind, not something canned, not something like, here's my sheet of paper that answers your objection to going on a short-term mission trip, but you have a thoughtful, empathetic answer to, you know, maybe some of those concerns so that you're not stuck guessing. And then last reason that we need to, you know, practice this patient persistence is because our ministry partners, this is the third group of stakeholders that we're going to be working with. Just as you guys, just as we are navigating ministry in our own context, it's important that we realize that they're doing the very same, right? And they're having to navigate day in and day out what it means to run their ministry. And for us as a mission team, this is one of the things that I think we should always keep in perspective, but in this year in particular is really important. Missions is disruptive to the local ministry. And what I mean by that is you've got your normal flow of life, right? And then you drop a group of people in there for a week and it kind of disrupts that week of ministry. And give you an example. So I grew up as my parents ran a Christian youth camp. I don't know, anybody go to Christian youth camp? No, I'm the only weirdo. All right, cool. Excellent, good. Fantastic way to grow up, but also kind of odd. But when I got into high school, my dad put me in charge of the maintenance crew. And before you guys start thinking my dad's some awesome guy who was grooming me into leadership and, you know, start at the bottom and work himself up, he just needed bodies, right? And my job basically consisted of mowing lawns, picking up trash, and changing light bulbs. But it was a job. And after I gained some experience, he actually allowed me to start taking on the task of leading work crews that would come to the camp during the summer. And if you've ever been at camp, you realize that summers are busy. You got kids all over the place. You got programs you're running, people running all over the place, and a group of people showing up to help you and do some very well-intentioned work was disruptive. It meant that you had to step away from the work that you were already doing and go help them, right? I remember so many times where I had a bunch of lawns to mow, but then I had to spend an hour teaching a college kid from the city how to use a rake. Like, you're sitting there going, okay, I still got to mow the lawn, but this kid can't even operate a rake. What am I doing? And I think it's important for us, you know, as ministry leaders, as we plan, to be patient with our partners and to realize they're navigating a lot. And that when we show up as a mission team, we want that disruption to what they're doing to be a positive thing, right? We know that if we step into their context, that we can help them, we can empower them and help them build them up. But we don't want it to be something that's draining. We don't want it to be something that is stressful to them in a way that demoralizes them. And that leads me to my fourth and final point here. And that is short-term missions is strategic because it has frontline impact in ministry, right? We talk about it being a disruption and being patient with our partners. Well, I can tell you, if you've been in ministry for any amount of time, especially in local church ministry, it can be challenging. It can be taxing mentally, emotionally. You know, we see it all the time that there are instances of, I can't remember the stat, but you know, there's an overwhelming number of youth pastors that essentially burn out of ministry within the first 3 or 4 years of ministry. You know, we see that stuff happen because working with people is challenging. Working in ministry is challenging and it's hard. Now think about the fact that they've been having to do that over the last year in the midst of a pandemic, struggling to know, are they going to get their congregation back, struggling to figure out how to meet the growing needs within their communities. And this is all falling on their shoulders. And I can tell you right now that if all you do is show up to a community with your mission team and look at that local pastor, that local leader, and say, Pastor, we're here to bless you for a week. We're here to love on you and care for you and lighten your burden for a week and encourage and empower you so that you step back into ministry passionate and filled up. Your impact is going to have a legacy. It's going to have a lasting impact on that community, because you are injecting life and energy and hope into that person that's on the front lines of ministry in that community, who will be there long after you're there, who is going to transform that community, by the grace of God, right? And so I would say that short-term missions serves an incredible function during this season, encouraging those leaders, encouraging those pastors, and really priming the pump for them to continue in effective and powerful ministry within their communities. So I know we're running a little bit low on time here, but I want to toss this over to Laura, and she had one more thought regarding those of you who might have traditionally gone internationally and might be looking domestically this summer.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Just wanted a quick touch on that. I even, just in the past 15 years that I've been involved in short-term missions, I've seen how we've really grown in health, in sustainable ministry. And part of that is through long-term relationships, right? Where you get to go year after year to your international partner and serve alongside of them. And we have international missions, of course, at Praying Pelican too. And we know that a lot of our teams are choosing to pause until 2022 to go back to that international partner. And we are praying alongside of you. We can't wait for you to be able to go and serve with them again. But if you're looking at 2021 and saying, is this a sustainable thing to just bounce in for 1 year and bounce out? I'd really encourage you to, the cornerstone of PPM's ministry is that we serve alongside pre-existing ministries and come under the local leadership of the church. And as long as that is the sustainable ministry, then all the work that you're doing for that week will also be sustainable. If there's a teenager that accepts Christ from that community, there's a church in place that can follow up with them. And that's really the biggest thing. It's also a time where you can be creative too. If there's a pastor friend that you went to school with back in the day and they live in a different area, you can see if there's a way that you could link together. If there's a whole lot going on in your own backyard, I'd encourage you too to reach out to others and say, hey, do you want to travel over to me for a week? And we can link in arms and serve together. I think there's just so much beauty that comes when churches serve together. So I just wanted to encourage you in that. Thanks. I'll pass it back to you, Mike.
Excellent. Sorry, Tori, we dug into a little bit of your time here at the end, but I'm going to kick it over to Tori, who is with Standards of Excellence, and he's going to kind of wrap us up a little bit tonight.
Okay. We do have one question that maybe you could answer, one of the two of you, and that was from Dawn about just as you've been carrying out some of these trips, any issues or conflicts you run into, particularly with domestic ones, in relation to some of the stakeholders, particularly political or community leaders. Have you run into any hindrances there? And if so, how did you respond, or how did you overcome those?
I can respond to that a bit. One thing that we were very intentional throughout the summer is making sure that we called the Department of Health in every place that we both served in, and also from the location where the team was coming from, just so that we got their approval. And doing that was huge. When we encountered somebody from the church who thought, hey, are you sure it's okay to be here? Is this a safe thing to do? We were able to say, we shared with the Department of Health in both areas the protocol, how we were serving, and they approved it. So that was huge. And oftentimes, we always had the approval of the local leaders and the pastors. So then it was just making sure, like, hey, are things okay with this community member? And they would help to just move that over.
Yeah, excellent. Good answer. So let me just share my screen here with you really quickly. as we close out our time at 6 o'clock Pacific time. You've seen a couple times a Google form link pop up into there. Pop in, fill that out. We're going to do like a little random drawing and send the mission journal to you so you can check it out and see if it's something that will be a helpful resource for you and your teams. It's also a way of kind of registering your attendance so that you know, if Mike and Laura have additional resources they want to send out, they've got your email address, or you know, we can follow up with you in that way. Mike and Laura, while I'm sharing here, if you want to stick your contact information in so people have that, you can do that as well. So if you haven't already, click on that Google form and fill it out. Another thing we want you to know about is that you're at Mission Connection, which is the general mission conference. Mission Connection also does a focus event, focusing in specifically on short-term missions. You're in the short-term mission track, so hopefully you're interested in that. Well, we've got an event that is completely short-term missions, the plenaries, the all of the workshops, all the exhibitors, everything there is all about short-term missions. And the question is, what's next? And we're gonna look at that from a variety of standpoints, not just from a COVID-19 standpoint. We've got you see a couple of speakers there. Additional plenary speakers are going to include a guy named Dave Jr., who's a missionary in North Africa. Dave Jr. is his public name. And then Moses, and I cannot say his last name, but he's a Rwandan pastor and partners with World Relief, and he will be sharing with us as well. So you can register now. The website is on there. If you need to take a little screenshot, take a screenshot, and you can register. Use that code MCGlobal, and you'll get $10 off the registration price, which right now is $35. That price goes through the end of January, and then it'll increase. But we'd love to have you join us at STM Connection as well. We've got a bunch of great content and programming for you there. So I believe the next thing in the conference is going to be the 6:30 plenary session. Of course, you can visit the exhibit hall while you're waiting, but I encourage you, don't miss out on the 6:30 session. I believe Daniel Fusco is the plenary speaker on that one. And then the short-term mission track continues with a 10-10 seminar workshop on virtual mission experiences and how to use those to enhance your partnership. There'll be an 11:15 workshop, and that one will be about debriefing your team participants. And then, of course, we've got one at 1:45 tomorrow, and that will focus in on team leaders. What does it take to lead a short-term mission team? So we encourage you to join us for those. And I am going to allow Mike and Laura to say one last goodbye, and then we'll be closing the workshop.
Awesome. Hey, thank you guys so much for spending a Friday evening with us at this Rager, this party. But I hope that the rest of the conference is really good for you. If you need anything, you know, if you have any questions or whatever, we really want to be here to support you guys as you're navigating ministry during this season. So please feel free to reach out to us. But yeah, Laura, I don't know if you have anything, but I'd love to pray us out. All right, excellent. So also thank you to Laura and thank you to Tori for being on this with us and kind of taking this journey with us. But let me go ahead and pray and we'll wrap this up. All right, Father God, thank you for these leaders. Thank you for them showing this passion and this commitment to being on mission, Lord, to being here on a Friday night to talk missions, Lord. So I want to pray for them that you infuse life and energy into them and wisdom and vision, Lord. And really, as you know, as we navigate this next year, Lord, we are really praying for the local church to mobilize and to share your hope and share your glory like never before during this season, Lord. But we're here to serve, and we're here to do whatever you've called us to do. And so we're going to put it in your hands and trust that you're going to use us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thanks. Hope to see you at another workshop.
Thank you.
Thank you too. Thanks for all of what you shared. It was really helpful.
Good.